Number one, when you improve accessibility, you improve the user experience for everybody, including those who don't have a disability. A couple of good examples: being able to invert the text on a website, change it from black on white to white on black, not only helps people with low vision using screen magnifiers, it helps people who are using their mobile devices in high or very low light to be able to see and comprehend your website and navigate it more smoothly with more joy. And the more fun they're having on your website, the more likely they are to spend some money or maybe spend some more money. Curve cutouts were developed for people with wheelchairs and walkers, but people who are delivery men and women and people who are new parents, they love those curve cutouts because they can push those dollies or those trams or carts through those curve cutouts, and their lives are made easier by something that was invented for people with disabilities. And the web, so it's that way in person and the websites. Improve accessibility, improve user experience for everybody. Improve accessibility, improve your search engine ranking. The search engines have gotten really good at knowing what the basic minimum guidelines are for accessibility. And if y'all want to check those, you can look up the WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The search engines know what to look for. They're looking for heading structure. They're looking for alternative text on your images. They're looking for labeled buttons and links and tables. They know what to look for. And if your site is deemed to be accessible or mostly accessible by the search engines, they will show you some love. And I don't know a website owner yet who doesn't want more organic traffic to their website, blog, or podcast. So improve accessibility, improve search engine ranking. Improve accessibility, give yourself the opportunity to reach a huge, mostly untapped market of highly loyal consumers who are ready to advocate for your business and brand if you make the effort. It's estimated that there's about 15% of the world's population has a disability of some kind. That would be over 1.3 billion people globally. It's about 60 million people in the U.S. In the U.S., of that 60, about 15 of that 60 million are people with vision loss. And vision loss, sadly, is more difficult to adapt for than other disabilities. But I don't know many companies who can afford to omit a market of 60 million in the US or 1.3 billion globally, or an estimated purchasing power of over 3.5 trillion annually. Don't know anybody who can afford to ignore that, but it doesn't even stop there. As a community, we are very loyal to businesses willing to make the effort because so few do it. We will support you during good times and bad times. And we see accessibility as a value added because so few people invest in accessibility. So we accept the fact we may have to overpay for products and services that are inclusive and delivered in an accessible manner. That's just part of what we accept. So just think about that as far as brand loyalty. And then finally, of this third part, we will advocate for people who make the effort because we want you to succeed. So we will tell our friends, our family members, our social media followers, and trust me, there are some influencers in the disability community who have millions of followers on their YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, and yet very few companies have seen the wisdom of leveraging those followings to promote their products or services. We tell our social media networks, heck, I like to say we'll tell our friends, we'll even tell people we don't like because we want you to succeed if you're making the effort. So huge market, highly loyal consumers, willing to advocate, which means you don't have to pay us to advocate. We'll take your money if you need to pay an influencer. I mean, heck, I will review products and promote the heck out of, if somebody wants to provide me the product to review and write me a check, but we advocate because we want people to succeed. That's three. Fourth, when you make the effort to reach out, to hire, to recruit, to train, to employ, to promote people with disabilities, then you generally get people who are positive, optimistic, dedicated, loyal, grateful. You also get something that is very valuable besides many of them being very talented, very qualified, very educated. You get something amazingly valuable, and that is you get people who are creative problem solvers because that's what they have to do every day of their lives in order to succeed or even to get by and survive. We have to be able to be our own Edisons and solve our own problems. That's just the way it is when you have a disability.
Welcome to your Wordless Podcast, the space where we redefine success, self-worth, and transformation. I am Nick Nieras, the soul-centered architect of transformation, helping you unlock your highest potential and build a legacy beyond limits. Now, whether it is self-mastery, career breakthroughs, or wealth creation, this is where change begins. Now let's dive in.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that you said yes to this, even though it's a little outside of what you would usually speak about. So I
No,
appreciate you, pushing outside the box there.
when I read your profile, I was in awe and I wanted to know how. A lot of questions that are coming up in my mind. I said, okay, how does he do this? Like, naturally, my instinct kicked, my curiosity kicked in. Like, how would he operate? How would he move? What does his day look like? So, that is also one of the questions or a few questions that I will be asking. But first, Max, can you tell us what was it like growing up as a Maxwell Ivey?
Right. So I grew up near Houston, Texas, way out in what was farm country at that time. My grandfather moved his 6 kids away from the city, so that's where we were. Everybody in my family was in the carnival business, or what they would call fairground ride operators or fun fair operators, depending on where you're at in the world. I was the third generation in the business, and my cousin, who's fourth generation, is still in the business and doing very well with his carnival. Also knew from an early age that I was going to lose most, if not all, of my vision to retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. I have recently learned that that was a false diagnosis. Instead, I have Bardet-Biedl syndrome, which is more rare than retinitis pigmentosa, but it causes the same vision loss at about the same time. Generally, men with Bardet-Biedl syndrome or with retinitis pigmentosa will have a large drop off of vision when they enter puberty. So by the time I went to junior high school, I was learning to read Braille, switching most of my reading from large print or using closed circuit TV monitor to enlarge just the print page on a screen, and switching to audiobooks for the most part, Braille for some textbooks, learning to use a white cane and navigating city streets and transportation with a white cane. My vision at that time was getting worse slowly, even though I had a big drop off going into junior high school. It stayed pretty much constant until I graduated from high school. By the time I graduated from college, it was down to what it is now, which is very limited light perception. I can see light if I look directly at the source, but I can't see shapes, colors, or shadows. And I find that most people understand total blindness better than they do light perception. Also, with people who are visually impaired, there's a huge spectrum of vision loss, from people who are just barely legally blind, which is 2,200 here in the US, to people like me who have almost no functional vision. During my school years, we just had to work with the teachers and we didn't have much in the way of technology in the 1980s.
Can imagine.
Uh, my geometry homework, somebody would take a magic marker and they would draw the examples that you would have to try to solve problems from on very large paper. And I would do my best to get the answers. And frankly, not having technology back then is probably why I didn't go into any type of science career, because I loved math and I really enjoyed science, and I probably would have, but the technology just didn't allow it at that time. So I like to tell people that the last year I studied math, some of my test papers weighed 2 pounds and you could get a contact high off of them. You know what I mean? But there really wasn't a lot of technology back then. You were starting to get computers, but having a computer with speech on it just wasn't within most people's means. So, but I participated in my family's carnival business from 5, when I boxed popcorn and made snow cones in my grandmother's food joint, till junior high when I set up rides and operated games, till high school when I did the bookings and again operated games. And after college, I went off to work for the IRS. I came back to the carnival because the IRS was very stressful place to work and they weren't paying me enough. And, so I went back to the Carnival. I was like, hey, I can have this kind of level of financial satisfaction with a lot less stress. So, and I got more involved in the business. I actually owned a few kids' games at one point. And in 2003, my dad passed away. By 2006, our Carnival was out of the business and we were working with my uncle's Carnival. It's a very traumatic period where I lost my dad, my business partner, and my best friend. And I also saw the beginnings of the end of our family business that had been in operation for probably 40 years. So at least our part of the family business, because there were still other families, or I guess you'd call them branches of the family tree, that were still in the business. So I needed something new to do. And I had the idea I'd help other people sell their used rides and games. And I would do that online. Well, in 2007, we didn't have WordPress or Facebook or even Wi-Fi at my house. So in order to get online to start with, I had to teach myself to code HTML. Now, most of y'all do not know what that means, and be thankful for it, because basically it requires you to learn how to create sentences with less thans, greater than, slashes. It's not fun.
No.
And I built my website one line at a time to sell used rides for 5 years, until finally WordPress came along and I migrated my site to WordPress. Unfortunately, since WordPress has added Gutenberg and now the full site editors, it's not as accessible as it used to be. So I'm looking for a new home for my websites, because I like being able to maintain my site if whoever I'm depending on to maintain it doesn't show up that day. Um, but yeah, I started helping people do that. I built the website. Then people said I had to have a blog, so I started a blog. Then I had somebody send me a video so I could sell their carousel. And I thought, hey, if the videos can sell carousels, maybe they can sell mags. So I started recording videos. I embraced social media as it came along. I built an email list. I did all the things that everybody has to do when they're running a small business. The only difference is I had to figure out a way to do them in a way that was available to Max. So sometimes my solutions were much more difficult and required more actual labor or more data entry or whatever than other people would have done it. But when you're starting out, or only been at it a few years, and you don't have a lot of money or credit or a lot of trust in other people to take over control of your creation, that's what you do. And, I talk to people all the time about self-determination or deciding to find solutions instead of making excuses. It's how over the years people have, referred to me as the what's your excuse or no excuses guy. And because the truth is, there are always solutions available to us. The problem is that most of those solutions are not fun. They're not easy. They're not enjoyable. Sometimes we even have to look silly to embrace a particular solution in the short term. But that's what I've done over the years. When I built my email list, I did it by telling people I'd give them a free page on my website. So I coded thousands of free pages on my website to build my email list. That's hard work.
Wow.
But it was the solution I had available to me. And so, like I say, people have said, Max, if you can do it, what's my excuse? And so
Exactly.
that's become part of my branding. And it really goes back to my Carnival days, because, when you grow up in a family of Carnival owners, the first thing you learn from an early age is that nobody cares about what's going on in your life. They could care less if you have a sick child, a broke truck, can't afford the diesel. All they want to know is, on Thursday or Friday night, can they ride the Ferris wheel? Can they buy a funnel cake or cotton candy or fairy floss or whatever they call it where you live? Or can they try to win a stuffed animal? And if they can do that, then that's like the first rung of success in the Carnival business. So from an early age, you learn other people don't care about your problems, and that you have to just find a way to get through life, to get open. So it taught me creative problem solving. It taught me how to decide to find the positive in life. It taught me a lot of things that have really helped me as I've gone through my career, because as you know, over the last 17 years, I've gone from helping people sell used rides to trying to be a life goals coach that nobody wanted to hire, to being an online media publicist where I helped a lot of people get booked on podcasts so they could tell their stories and promote their businesses. And then finally, to being an accessibility expert where I help people grow their businesses by leveraging the disability community. So I've had to continue going, and that has required deciding to find the positive, deciding to find solutions. It's also involved being willing to ask for help or opportunities and accept help or opportunities when they are offered to me, or what I call interdependence. So these are things I learned. Some of them I learned as part of being a carny. Some of them I learned as part of losing my vision gradually over time. Some of them I learned from my own personal experience later in life. But these are the kind of things that have allowed me to keep going to find my perfect place in accessibility. Growing up in East Texas, there were 6 families living on one big plot of land. There were 20 something children altogether, so we always had cousins to play with. Nobody ever bothered us at school because they knew they might have to deal with more than just one person. If you mess with the Ivies, you might have to mess with the Cerbers, Crouches, Wagners, what have you. And of course, bullying wasn't as bad back then as it is now, because back then bullying ended at the edge of the playground. People couldn't follow you home and bully you in 1979.
Yeah.
So these are some of the things about Max growing up, some of Max's later life. And one thing I did forget to mention, and I got to stop doing this, is with the encouragement of family members, friends, teachers, scoutmasters, etc. I not only graduated from a traditional high school and college, I also completed all the requirements to be an Eagle Scout. So I'm one of the few blind Eagles. They say only, and of course the stats have changed because the organization has changed, but they used to say only 3% of boys that start down that road make it to Eagle. There's never been any statistics done on how few blind people or people with this person with a disability makes it to that point. So I just know that it's a very small group. And so I try to remember to mention it because it did take a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work. And more importantly, it took breaking the whole thing up into really small pieces and doing it over a long period of time. It took me almost my entire 4 years of high school, between going to class, working the Carnival midway on the weekends that I wasn't on a camp out, and then doing the scouting stuff.
Wow. That is dedication and commitment.
Well, we just didn't know any better back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've I've often thought about this. At least back then, Carnival kids or kids that grew up in family business like ranching, farming, etc. They were raised to be tough. They were raised to find solutions because that was how it was done. It was how everybody did it. You know what I mean? So I think some of what I do now is just because I don't know any better. And I've got, an entire lifetime of experience. So one thing people ask me all the time is, Max, how do you stay so positive? How do you stay so optimistic? I tell them it's 2 things. One, it's knowing that that's a decision. And more often than not, I will decide to find the good and the positive in life, even if it takes me a little while some days. But the other thing is resilient people are usually resilient because they've lived through a lot of bad stuff. And I like to say that I've spent more than my fair share of my life on my butt looking up at where the sky is supposed to be. So, these are things, and everybody listening to me right now has been through stuff that you could be using as fuel to go through whatever it is you're trying to do right now, whatever it is that scared you to the point that you have yet to take the first step, whatever has overwhelmed you because you're not ready to take the first step because you can see the mountain or the staircase and it's got you intimidated. But every one of us has been through stuff. People who have had children have had hard roads to conception, delivery, raising those children. People who have started businesses in the past that failed. Failure can still be a great teacher if you decide to look at it the right. We've all been through stuff. People have been unemployed for months or years at a time, but they managed to find a job. We've all been through stuff. And if you can look back at that stuff and find something good, use it as motivation to go, I've been through some really hard times in the past. I want to write a book. I want to run a marathon. I want to start a new company. I want to find a new wife or husband and go, I've been through stuff and I'm going to use that stuff to go through the next thing.
I want to go back
This
to
is my problem. I can talk for an hour about inspirational, motivational stuff. I can also talk for an hour about accessibility. And half the time I get stuck figuring out who the heck is Max supposed to be today?
You just be who you need to be that day. I mean, I am gonna,
Exactly. And that's
yeah.
what I do. That's what I do most of the time. But every so often, I get too much time on my hands, and I start thinking about, wait a minute. So yeah, I'm realizing the inspirational stuff, especially the stuff around the website and the blog and all that stuff that was hard work. That stuff ties right into what I'm doing now because back then there was no accessibility. You know, it's only been recently that we've started to even enforce the Americans with Disabilities Act against the internet, which it was always intended to cover the internet. But, for the longest time, government regulators decided to see the side of businesses and it was not enforced against. Now we have a Justice Department that has no interest in enforcing any regulations on anybody. So it's going to come back to people like me who have been advocating for years. Look, compliance only gets you so far. Regulations only get you so far because most people, especially small business people, they're not scared of being caught not being accessible. The only way we get most people to become accessible is to show them what's in it for them, to give them a reason. And before I finish, I want to cover four things really quickly if we're still recording.
We are.
All right, these are four things. I'm going to tell you these things, and when I'm through, I hope that you are convinced that accessibility is in your best interest. Okay, so
Are you stuck in a job that you don't love, feeling like you're meant for more? It is not in your head, it is in your soul. I am Nick Yaras and I help high achievers like you break free from burnout, rewire self-doubt, and build a life aligned with purpose through coaching, hypnotherapy, and soul activation. Because let's face it, real wealth isn't just about money, it is about aligned and happy heart, mind, and soul. Now, remember, you are worthy and you are enough. Let's transform your life together. Visit www.thenickyaras.holisticlifestyle.com to begin.
number one, when you improve accessibility, you improve the user experience for everybody, including those who don't have a disability. A couple of good examples: being able to invert the text on a website, change it from black on white to white on black. Not only helps people with low vision using screen magnifiers, it helps people who are using their mobile devices in high or very low light to be able to see and comprehend your website and navigate it more smoothly with more joy. And the more fun they're having on your website, the more likely they are to spend some money or maybe spend some more money. Curve cutouts were developed for people with wheelchairs and walkers, but people who are delivery men and women and people who are new parents, they love those curved cutouts because they can push those dollies or those trams or carts through those curved cutouts, and their lives are made easier by something that was invented for people with disabilities. And the web, so it's that way in person and the websites. Improve accessibility, improve user experience for everybody. Improve accessibility, improve your search engine ranking. The search engines have gotten really good at knowing what the basic minimum guidelines are for accessibility. And if y'all want to check those, you can look up the WCAG or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The search engines know what to look for. They're looking for heading structure. They're looking for alternative text on your images. They're looking for labeled buttons and links and tables. They know what to look for. And if your site is deemed to be accessible or mostly accessible by the search engines, they will show you some love. And I don't know a website owner yet who doesn't want more organic traffic to their website, blog, or podcast. So improve accessibility, improve search engine ranking. Improve accessibility, give yourself the opportunity to reach a huge, mostly untapped market of highly loyal consumers who are ready to advocate for your business and brand if you make the effort. It's estimated that there's about 15% of the world's population has a disability of some kind. That would be over 1.3 billion people globally. It's about 60 million people in the US. I don't know the stats within those stats in other countries, but in the US, of that 60, about 15 of that 60 million are people with vision loss. And vision loss, sadly, is more difficult to adapt for than other disabilities. But I don't know many companies who can afford to omit a market of 60 million in the US or 1.3 billion globally, or an estimated purchasing power of over 3.5 trillion annually. Don't know anybody who can afford to ignore that, but it doesn't even stop there. As a community, we are very loyal to businesses willing to make the effort because so few do it. We will support you during good times and bad times. And we see accessibility as a value added because so few people invest in accessibility. So we accept the fact we may have to overpay for products and services that are inclusive and delivered in an accessible manner. That's just part of what we accept. So just think about that as far as brand loyalty. And then finally, of this third part, we will advocate for people who make the effort because we want you to succeed. So we will tell our friends, our family members, our social media followers, and trust me, there are some influencers in the disability community who have millions of followers on their YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, and yet very few companies have seen the wisdom of leveraging those followings to promote their products or services. We tell our social media networks, heck, I like to say we'll tell our friends, we'll even tell people we don't like because we want you to succeed if you're making the effort. So huge market, highly loyal consumers, willing to advocate, which means you don't have to pay us to advocate. We'll take your money if you need to pay an influencer. I mean, heck, I will review products and promote the heck out of, if somebody wants to provide me the product to review and write me a check, but we advocate because we want people to succeed. That's three. Fourth, when you make the effort to reach out, to hire, to recruit, to train, to employ, to promote people with disabilities, then you generally get people who are positive, optimistic, dedicated, loyal, grateful. You also get something that is very valuable besides many of them being very talented, very qualified, very educated. You get something amazingly valuable, and that is you get people who are creative problem solvers because that's what they have to do every day of their lives in order to succeed or even to get by and survive. We have to be able to be our own Edisons and solve our own problems. That's just the way it is when you have a disability.
Hi, I'm Nick Nieras, your host of the Your Worthless podcast. Now, if these real raw stories hit home, don't wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe my Spotify and YouTube. For bite-sized inspirational reels, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Don't wait. Your transformation starts today. Thank you, and bye for now.
So I just gave y'all 4 reasons. And if you just stopped at the third one where I mentioned $3.5 trillion, I'm okay with that. But improve accessibility, you improve the user experience, you raise your search engine ranking, you open up a new market, and you can hire some really great, awesome people to be part of your team. So these are some reasons why people should care about accessibility, why they should be willing to make the investment. And look, I'm even going to make it easy on y'all. If y'all go to my website, theaccessibilityadvantage.com, and you say, hey, I saw you talking to Nicolette the other night, and you were awesome, and I was really impressed. But I'm still nervous. I'm still scared. I'm still overwhelmed by accessibility. You reach out to me through my email address or my contact form. I will review your homepage for free. No obligation, no expectation, no nothing. I just want to give you some feedback on whether or not your homepage is accessible, because I want you to be successful, but I also want people that I know with disabilities who may end up on your website to be able to use your website. So I don't just do this to help the business owner or the nonprofit or the government agency. I do this to help all those thousands or millions of people with disabilities who will benefit every time I help somebody who owns a website or a blog to improve their online presence.
Max, can I share my website to you?
Yeah, sure. Matter of fact, that's going to be a new feature on my podcast. I'm going to start taking the websites of other podcast hosts, and I'm going to do a case study on them, and I'm going to release that on my podcast, if that's okay with you. So give that some thought.
Fantastic. Yes.
So
Yes.
the way this is going to work is I will get their website, and I will start off by doing a review of the website, and then I will suggest some of the changes to them. And I don't expect people to make all the changes because not everybody has the team, the time, the resources to do it. But if they'll make, like 2 or 3 of the changes so we can show the audience some progress,
Yes,
then I
please.
do a follow-up, and, then I talk about, hey, this person has decided to do the right thing and do it in what's in their best interest. And hopefully they're going to continue. Kind of like when somebody does a makeover show with somebody, and they fix their hair and their makeup and they get them dressed and stuff, and they go, we feel like that they'll be able to handle this from now on, but you just never know. So I feel like that would be
I
some
think
really
that
helpful
was
stuff.
fantastic, Max. I have
That's one of the things I want to do is I want to do some before and after, and some case study type stuff with people's websites. And since for some reason people aren't taking me up on the offer of reviewing their websites for free, I have no idea why that is.
Oh my
unless they're just
gosh.
scared I'm going to try to charge them money. I don't know. But I mean, look at
I want
this
to
way.
send
I'm a
mine to
nice
you
guy.
after our interview.
But yes, so I'm going to start asking the podcast hosts, and then like I said, we'll have some additional content from my website, and then what I also want to do, and of course you're welcome to use any of what we've just said or none of it, because I don't say anything that I'm not willing to have out in the world. Authenticity, honesty, those are a couple of my number one things in my personality, and they they bleed over into my brand, as you can tell. um, is when I do these case studies, I also want to interview the business owner or the podcast host and find out what they've learned, if it's changed anything about them, if it's affected their business. Because what I'm really hoping is that we can start building some case studies of people who have embraced accessibility and have received some sort of positive benefit, whether that's how they feel about themselves or their business, customers, staff, coworkers. I interviewed a gentleman for my podcast who they own a company called Less Annoying CRM. And I found them while doing a search for CRM that was accessible. And once I found it, I was like, I got to have these guys on my podcast and talk about how they got into access. And they actually got into it because their customer service team said, hey, we want to learn about accessibility. We want to make our website accessible, but we also want to make this place more inclusive to people who are women, people of color, people of different genders. And so this whole idea of inclusion and accessibility, they call it IDEA.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were the first
Inclusion,
person I ran across
diversity.
who used it that way.
Right.
I've also heard it done DEIA, but my tongue doesn't work that well that way. So I'm going to keep. So it bubbled up from their customer service people, and what they're finding though is they only have 60 people, and they live in California. They're finding that they can now compete with some of the bigger companies on talent, because a lot of the young people, they want to be part of a socially conscious business, and accessibility is part of that. I worked with a nonprofit. I was actually just working with them because I wanted to use their online education platform as a presenter, because I love talking to young people. And we had to fix some accessibility stuff. It was originally NEPRS. Now they call it Pathful. I can't call him a client, but I am a regular presenter on the platform because I just believe in it so much. The person there said that they now have people wanting to work there and wanting to learn about accessibility because they're building up their resume. They believe that by working in the accessibility team at Pathful, they're going to be able to use that and leverage that to get a better, higher paying or job with more benefits. So you see things like this. There's all sorts of benefits to embracing accessibility and inclusion. And that's what I want to do with the podcast. I want to do the case studies, some short tutorials, and I really want to do some stuff with some business owners where we do the before and the after, and then just talk about if their attitude has changed about accessibility, which not everybody's will. Some people, it's always going to be about just making sure they don't get in trouble. But how did it affect them during the course of us addressing their website? So yeah, I would love to look at your website. I would love for
Yeah.
us to plan out something where we could do something for the
So
accessibility
we'll
advantage
swap.
podcast.
We'll swap.
Yeah,
I'll be on
yeah.
your podcast.
Get me on my
Okay.
podcast. We'll talk about
Awesome.
accessibility in your website, and
Cool.
I don't exactly have a blueprint. So not only will you be on my podcast, you'll be helping
I'll
me
be the
figure out
person.
the
Yeah.
podcast. You'll be
Okay.
the
Oh my
guinea
God.
pig.
Yay.
We'll figure it out as we
Gladly.
go. And of course, the really cool thing is, as you and I both know, one of the really cool things about podcasting is most audience love real. They love people
Yes.
figuring stuff out as they go. They do not like people who already know everything, because that's discouraging. We'll actually create some content around how we figure out to create the content,
Okay. So I will be dropping my website to you after the interview, Max,
Yes.
and
If
then
you just send that to me in an email or through LinkedIn, either one is fine.
yeah,
Then and I'll tell you what we probably ought to do. We probably ought to schedule a short chat to kind of at least
set the tone.
brainstorm what's going to happen.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So I'll send you, after you send me your link, I'll send you my short chat link, and we can
Yeah. And
get
then
on there.
Max, I have so many things in my head right now in the pipelines, and so because no, okay, the other problem that I am facing at the moment is that I have so many people pitching to me through LinkedIn on how to, get clients, yada, yada, yada. And I just don't have, I just feel like the energy is not right with them. And so when you talked to me about, improving the livelihoods of those that with disabilities, and I don't know why somehow I felt called to maybe work with them on my team, like maybe just one, just because I run, like, at least I try
Okay.
to
We,
run
we,
7
we can,
social
we can,
media.
we
uh
can figure out what that looks. We can definitely talk and figure out what that would look like. I'd be more than,
exactly.
I'd be
If
more
you
than to help you.
Yeah, if you have, like, if like there's a pool that I could tap into and we could, oh my god, I would rather work with them because I know they're real and genuine people, and they just don't have any other agenda.
Oh, there's some phonies in the disability community. I hate to
Oh,
tell you that.
JR. Oh,
Yeah, there are.
okay. No, but then I hope that I'll be able to, tell them apart, like which one's real, which one's which.
I think you will. I don't think you've gotten to this point in your career as a as a teacher, as a guide, without having some intuition as to who you want to work with, is because that's the most important thing we have to learn as sole entrepreneurs, is when to say no and who to say no to, and getting to the point where we can kind of tell who we really want to work with and who we don't.
Makes sense.
Neither one of us have energy. I'm going to share something with you that I share often, not all the time, and it isn't a big deal because it's under control. I have chronic lymphocytic leukemia, which is stage 0. My white count is under control. They say I could live a very long life and never have it progress to the next stage or have any real symptoms, but it does cause me to have fatigue. My immune system is compromised, and it takes me longer to recover from illness or injury. So I have to be really careful as to who I work with, because I can't take on people that drain me.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yes.
you don't have energy to burn
Yes.
either, girl. Nobody does in this world. Nobody has energy they can afford to give away to somebody that's just going to drain it and not return it in some form. So, but I have to be even more careful because of the CLL. But I feel like we have really connected. And this is one of the reasons why I do podcast interviews, because if you if you sit down and do an interview, by the time you're through, you're going to know. I mean, you're going to have a pretty good idea if you have a connection, if you could actually do business with each other if you had to, or if you would feel comfortable referring them to a friend. If you know, so I
Yeah.
and also I always learn something, or I relearn something, because as you know, humans are really bad about forgetting important lessons and having to learn them more than once. So sometimes during a podcast interview, I'll have an aha moment, and sometimes I'll have a re-aha moment.
Me
So
too.
where I relearned something that I stopped doing that I know I need to be doing. And of course, my mentor, Alex Sanfilippo, he's the owner of Podmatch, and
Right.
he was my first client. And I started on a volunteer basis. He said, Max, if we ever get to where we can afford to hire you, we'll hire you. And I just enjoyed the platform. I needed the additional option to find good hosts,
Yeah.
because before Podmatch, I was finding and I had to work a lot harder at it. I had to send a lot more pitches out, and so. And I'm really not even using Podmatch to its fullest, because I really need to take more advantage of the workflow that's built into the site and some of the AI stuff. But I resist. At this point in my career, I still resist systems on some days. But Alex, he's like, Max, if there's one thing I can tell you about the success of your business, and he actually has two things, but the one thing is, you have to get where you can talk to more people. He says, because most people, he said, I've yet to run across somebody who's met you who didn't like you, who didn't want to be friends with you, or want to
Admittedly.
do something for you, or want to work with you, or want to hire. He said, people just they're around you and they have a reaction to you. He said, I've never seen anybody not. And he said, you just have to find a way of getting in front of more people without spending a lot of money to leave your house. And so this was a really cool experience for me tonight. And like I said, I think we do need to have a quick talk to figure out the outline for future episode of the Accessibility Advantage where we feature you and your podcast.
Gosh, am I
and
going
your
to be the
website.
first one?
Yeah, and people love real content. They're gonna love us as we fall and stumble. I'm telling you, it's gonna be
Exactly.
it's gonna be great.
I'm gonna be doing a lot of confession because my website was not made by me. It was made by my brother-in-law, and he is the marketing geek, website builder geek. And so
Well,
right
cool.
now, when you were talking about your
Maybe we can bring him in too. Maybe we get all three of us on Zoom or Riverside or all that. By the way, I recently had a bad experience with Zoom, but I tell you what, when we record this, if it's okay with you, because I feel like I can trust you, when we do get ready to record, whether it's me and you and him, me and him, whatever, I'm hoping we can do it on Riverside and that you will take care of the recording part of it. And then I'll just have to show up and remember what I'm supposed to do. Is that okay with you?
I could do that. Yes, and I could download, and then you want me
And
to do
then
the
just
editing
share
as
it
well, or
through Google or Dropbox or iCloud or something like that. Yeah, cool.
all right,
All
awesome.
right, cool. I tell you what, I don't know what time it is there. I know it's late here. I'm imagining it's
I am
very
so
early
sorry.
there.
It is 11 a.m. for me. It's just
Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad.
yeah.
I recently did an Australian interview where they were awake at 6 o'clock in the morning and I was on at 9 o'clock at night or something like that.
Yeah.
The only time I know what time the other person is when I ask Google, because I have trouble keeping track. But matter of fact, if you want to get a good laugh, you should be here when one of my doctors calls me and I have to make an appointment. They'll go, "Okay, Mr. Ivey, are you available at 3 o'clock on the 29th?" And I go, "Wait a minute, let me ask Alexa." And of course I've changed it. So I say COMPUTER, and I ask it if I have an appointment on a given date, and if she tells me I do, then I have to get a different. It's just one of those things. You have to do what works for you. And some of the technology that would help me is just not accessible. Some of the,
God, I hate.
the
I don't know
workflow.
why, but
Some
I
of the
hate
workflow stuff is just
hearing
not
that.
accessible.
I mean, you have as much right to be here and to enjoy all of these things that we have right now. This is much, a normal people would. And
Yeah, I'm normal. I'm just different normal.
yes. Okay, so all right, this is just me
So
thinking out loud.
you're gonna do whatever you do to turn this into a podcast episode, which I pity your editor.
I will. Don't worry, I'll work my magic.
Don't give your editor my email address because he or she may put a hit out on
No,
me.
I will be the one editing. Don't you worry. But then
I feel
if
bad for
there's
you.
somebody, no, and that is why I need to be able to. I want to release some of this editing but I have yet to find that one person that I can trust, and just it's gonna be genuine with the work. And perhaps who knows? Maybe somebody in the
What
community.
exactly do you need?
I need basically a social media. Somebody who helps me schedule my social media posts because I have seven freaking platforms.
Okay, I'm not going to promise, okay, because I have to reach out and make sure that she has the bandwidth to use the big kids term, okay?
Okay.
But
and also, I mean, my resources are limited as well, Max. So I have to be mindful with that as well.
Okay.
And so
all right, so here's what I'm going to do. I know somebody who I think it would be perfect who does some work on the side besides the work she does for the jobs where they send her a check every other week. I will ask her if she is available to take on a new client, and I will ask her what kind of financial range. If she can give me a range or something, then I'll forward that to you. And if you think it's doable, then I'll make an introduction. If you don't think it's doable, then I'll just tell her, hey, it's not in their price range, which I'm sure won't be the first time she's heard that.
Okay.
I don't want to volunteer my friend until I ask her first off,
Yes.
But I know somebody who I also have now this person is not disabled in any way. She just works for a company that does accessibility on a big scale. But I have another friend who is visually impaired, but not as bad as me. She can still use a screen reader, who does social media work for people, who is trying to stay under the Social Security disability income threshold. So she's looking for mad money, not for crazy money, if you understand my meaning at all.
I don't know. What
You
is
know,
that? What does that
she's
mean?
looking to make some extra money without losing
Okay.
her monthly check. So
Right,
if
right.
the first one isn't interested, then the second one I'm pretty sure would be in. And
Like
I
a
think
side hustle.
exactly,
Okay.
yes, yeah, yeah. Because
Okay.
here in the
I mean,
United States, we have to pay for our health care. Okay, so
yeah,
if you have a
I noticed that.
so have a disability and they put you on the government dole where you get a check every month, you are limited in how much additional income you can make. If you exceed a particular number, then they take you off of the system and they take away your medical benefits. And since the disability community, a lot of us have need of doctors and probably couldn't afford to pay doctors or replace our current government health insurance with free market health insurance, there are a lot of people in the disability community who are looking to do side hustle. And sadly, the only reason more of them don't do side hustles because there's so many corrupt people out there hiring side hustlers, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
There are so many ripoffs and scams in the side hustling arena, and a lot of people with disabilities would take that work, but there's a lot of fear around, am I going to get ripped off by doing work for somebody else as a side hustle? So me,
I
I've been blessed.
yeah.
I get paid to write. I get paid to talk. I have some consulting clients, you know. So I'm very blessed. Even though the price of food keeps going up to the point where
It's the same in Malaysia too, so
yes,
it's a
yes.
world
So the
crisis.
only difference is I believe in Malaysia, y'all are going to be if something doesn't change here in the next 6 weeks, I think y'all are going to be better off than we are because I think that y'all still y'all still produce enough of your own needs and you won't be subject to the tariffs if y'all's country want and businesses there want to do business with China or Japan or Korea the way people here in America are looking at. So I think you will probably be better off long run. But yeah, the prices are going up. But like I say, I have been very blessed. Recently, I've started pitching new publications to write for because I want to widen out um, my uh, my experience as far as a freelance writer. You know, so and also because I want to get to the point where when somebody hires me to improve their accessibility, that they're also going to hire me to create content either for their site or my site or their podcast or my podcast or both. You know, because I don't like chasing clients, and I
Me
feel like
too. No,
I
no,
don't like
no,
lead
no,
generation.
no,
It
no.
stinks. It's
That's a big
horrible.
no for me. It gives me the ick, Max, when I'm so sorry, like people who may be
It
listening to this
makes
right
me
now.
tired. It doesn't give me the ick because I used to be a carny and I used to sell stuff all the time, but it makes me tired.
You can just tell when somebody just, somehow they on LinkedIn especially they like your post and then they start commenting some very short, I don't know, affirming message of what
Yeah,
you just
something
posted,
didn't
and
take
then
them
they
5
go
seconds.
slide into your DMs and then they say, I see that you're da, da, da.
Hey, mine is even worse because
Yeah,
I can't.
I
No,
would
no, no.
reckon so.
Here's why mine's worse, and it just shows the stupidity on the platform. Not you and me, but you know, for a lot of people, my profile shows that I've been contracting to AudioEye since 2022, I think is what it shows. And anybody that looks at that is going to realize that I do not own the company. I have no decision making authority, but I get at least one DM a day wanting to sell stuff to
My
AudioEye, and I have to tell them, look,
gosh.
I ain't
My
AudioEye. I just work
gosh.
for them people.
I know, right? It's like, I, okay, it is tough out there. I mean, like for them to go, but no, but they just don't use their either their common sense or they're just trying to cast their net, just see
And
if
too big a
anybody,
hurt.
yes, anybody takes the bait, and it's sad. And so, and this is why I even though podcasting, I'm very grateful for Alex. He found me through he dropped me an email, and that's why I got onto Podmatch, and that's why you see I think I'm one of the few, if not the only Malaysian who has a podcast on Podmatch, and 95% of my audience are from, or at least my guests are from the States. So, and that's given me a lot of exposure. and I've made connections as well. In fact, the first time I went to the States, I met with at least 5 of them because that was the whole.
I would imagine though that it's challenging because of people in the US and not only finding people who need your services and are interested in your services, but are willing to hire somebody from outside the US for the kind of services you offer. I would imagine that there's some
It is. And so the clients that I have, some of them are like word of mouth, which is from where I am right now. And then I've gotten one so far. I don't know how. I'm supposed to speak with her, I think the next 2 weeks to set up a call, a clarity call. I'm like, and I'm interested. How did she find out about me? And I believe in attracting as well. I don't want to chase, to be honest.
So here's one thing I would tell you to do. If you
Okay.
haven't already, I would do whatever you can to get to know Alex and Alicia better. Because there isn't a stronger promoter for somebody they care about than Alex and Alicia. I have not signed a bunch of clients, but I know that there's been a lot of interest from people who they have introduced me to, people they've told me about, people that are using their website that they've made an introduction because I'm the accessibility person for their. But I'm not suggesting that you do it in any way that's phony. I feel like you
Yeah.
naturally make friends very easily, but
Thank you.
I'm just saying that you might want to look him up on LinkedIn and start following his content and get in the conversation with him. 'Cause he's a
Yeah.
really cool, very friendly, very outgoing, gregarious kind of feller, and he's
Very
the kind of
authentic
guy
too.
who really helps the people that he cares about. Another guy I would look up, and I'm not saying to do it in a mercenary way. I don't think you have that in you, or we wouldn't still be talking an hour and a half later. Is Chris Cowden, Cownden. And if you want, I'll make a LinkedIn introduction for you.
Okay. That'd be great.
Yeah, he's been in AppSumo and he's done some live events and he's built up a very large community, but he's been dealing with some emotional health problems that he's open about online. So I'm not revealing anything he doesn't want out there. So he's really kind of to keep it to people who know somebody he knows. So, but I will introduce you to Chris. He's a really cool guy. He's another one of those people. If Chris takes a liking to you, he is going to push. He doesn't know any other way. He feels like helping his friends is basically how he represents himself. That's just who he is, Just like I said earlier, authenticity and honesty is just part of how I do things. It's who I am. And it's one of the reasons why I wasn't a more successful Carnival owner.
Why?
Because you have to lie a lot more than I was capable of.
I don't like it. I don't like. I just.
No, I'm serious. We actually
Just
had
honesty. No, it's just
we
not.
actually had
Christian.
no. I'm serious though. We actually had festival organizers who told my dad, you're too honest to be in this business.
You and me both. I was told by my last boss, and said to me, "Oh, your people skill is just not good. It's just not going to cut it anymore because this is an operation center." I mean, okay, she didn't frame it that way, but it was implied in that sense. So your people skills is not really where it's not gonna cut it. We need somebody who's more operational and
No,
more
what that means,
tech.
yeah, what that means is
Detail.
I'm sorry. No,
No
what that
worries.
means is we need somebody more focused on selling our stuff, and you're not that kind of person.
No, it's not. It's not about even about selling because I was in a shared service center, so it's more about operation, process reengineering, and all those things. And so naturally, I came from a consulting background, and so I joined the company because they were setting up this new center. So I joined for 2.5 2 years plus, and then I realized, of course, I realized all from the beginning that my strongest suit is my people skill, and basically they did not really they needed me during the setup, cultivating the culture, but after that, to be more efficient, be more lean in terms of their processes, I'm just not the person. So I was let go part of the one of the personnel during the restructuring, but then I couldn't be happier because here I am. It pushed me to really put the pedal on my business. Of course, it's not been an easy journey. Still 1 year in, to be honest. At least 2 months. Wait, February, March, April, May. So 3 months officially, like telling the world that hey, I'm a business owner. So yeah,
Alrighty. And who is your
somebody who's stuck in their relationship, in their job, or in their business.
do you find that most people are stuck if most people if they are stuck in their business or for work, they are also stuck in their life or stuck in their marriage or stuck in their
Yes,
relationship?
of course, because I just mirror my client are the previous version of myself, and so I've gone through the other side and walked through some of those things, and I want to help people who's lived the same experiences that I have lived and are currently in that space.
All right. Well, I will think if I can think of if I run across anybody who I think might be a good client. I'm also going to think about what you said about wanting to help at least one person with a disability. I'll think about that,
Oh my
and
God,
then we'll
Max, thank
schedule a
you.
call to kind of brainstorm the
Okay.
the case study episode, first case study episode of the accessibility advantage.
Yes, we will do that. Okay, Max, I know I am taking up your time. It's already 1 hour.
No,
I'm
I'm
gonna.
fine. I'm fine. Look, I'm not. One of the many things that makes me different is I'm not one of those people who's going to make somebody else feel like they are taking my time if I don't have anywhere else to be. And right this minute, I don't have anywhere else to be. So I'm not going to, if I'm not going to miss the opportunity of saying something needs to be said or getting clear on something because I want you to feel like taking up his time. He must have somewhere to be.
I'm just respectful
I
of your
understand. I
time.
understand that you're respectful, but I understand that you're respectful. But to me, when you give somebody the impression that you're busy when you're not, that's basically trying to make yourself feel better while you make the other person feel less. And that's just not something I like doing. So if I had a hard stop, I'd have told you about it. I don't. I think we got everything covered. You've got more content than you need for one episode.
Oh my God, yes.
Feel free to use any of it as outtakes, B-roll, whatever you want to call it, to promote the episode. I'm fully fine with you using anything I said today.
Okay. I am, well, hang on, Max. I am going to ask you what a one self-worth question. Okay. At
Okay.
least
All right.
of my
Yeah,
show.
we not only got off the track, we got out of the train yard. I mean,
Exactly. And then we circled the earth and then come back.
there you
Okay.
go.
Can you share? I mean, you did basically, but then can you share any personal experiences or stories of self discovery and how it positively impacted your sense of self?
Right. This one is very easy. When I first started helping other people sell their used rides, I just thought, hey, I'm a guy who's working hard every day to try to build a business to support my family. I didn't see myself as anything special, and I still don't because I don't think there's anything I do that other people can't do. Mainly if I was special or unique, then there'd be no reason for your audience to listen to me because they wouldn't be able to do what I do. But I know they can. I know many of them have, and many of them will. So I'm I'm going along doing the thing, building the Midway marketplace, selling used rides. And people started saying, Max, all these challenges you've had to overcome are very inspiring. We'd like to hear more about being a blind entrepreneur. And I'm like, no, because it's not a big deal. I'm just doing what I got to do. I just take on the next challenge and find some way to get through it, either myself or with help from friends, either friends that I know personally or friends that I meet online or strangers online that become friends. So, but people kept saying it. And eventually, a friend of mine, really good friend of mine who I met online, who recently moved not too far from my house, and I've actually gotten to meet her in person a couple of times. Her name is Adrienne Smith. I refer to her as my blogging mama. And because she taught me everything I know about blog commenting, about relationship building online, relationship marketing online. And she said, Max, you are inspiring. And she says, I understand that you don't get it, but I'm going to help you understand it. She said, here's the deal, Max. If you decided that you just wanted to sit on your couch and watch TV and eat junk food, She said, or listen to TV and eat junk food. Nobody would say the first bad thing about it because you have a disability. You're blind. She said, but the fact that you have an excuse and don't use it is what makes your story powerful. She said, now you need to get out there and tell your story more often. And if that means, she said, I don't think you need a second website. She said, but if that means starting another website, then do it. So that got me started on the idea that what I was doing would inspire and help other people change their lives, either directly or indirectly. And then as a follow up to that, when I realized I needed a second website because I didn't believe the people in the amusement industry would be the right kind of people to talk to about the life as a blind entrepreneur, the motivational aspect, I asked people, what should I call myself? And they said, well, Max, we've been calling you the blind blogger on LinkedIn and Facebook for a couple of years now. You'd be crazy to be anything but the blind blogger. And, but the funny thing happened after I got the website was some of my sighted friends were like, Max, you're too smart. You're too talented. You're too great a storyteller. You do not need to emphasize your vision loss to make a living online. You should. And so they were disappointed in me. And then there were some blind people that were friends with me. They were mad for me using, quote, the blind card, unquote, because this is like 10, 12 years ago. And back then there was even a worse stigma about disability online. And so many people decided that it was not in their best interest to be open about their disability online. I was one of the few people. In fact, not only did people know I was blind, not only was it part of my name, but I was out there, shamelessly putting myself out every day, anywhere I could to be seen so I could grow my two online businesses. But here's the really cool thing. I've already told you about the first case where my friends helped me understand that I'm inspirational. I've been working for them and they helped me understand that, back then, 10 or 12 years ago, I was a trailblazer. I helped other people with disabilities find the courage or the freedom to put themselves out. And over time, we've gone from me being called the blind blogger because I was the only blogger most people on social media knew who was blind, to the point where now you can't go on social media or travel around the internet without running across people who have a disability, where the disability is openly part of their website domain, their homepage, their social media profiles with emojis, stickers, GIFs, videos, etc. And I feel like, I just recently came to understand from, some people that have been working in the advocacy field a long time. I'm going to give a shout out to Mariella Paulino, who's hearing impaired. She helped me understand. She's like, Max, you were a trailblazer. You were out there doing it when everybody else was afraid to, and now everybody's doing it. And of course, it took over a decade, but it took technology making it easier for people to brand themselves or to identify themselves with their disability, especially with the emojis. So this is twice in my lifetime, and who knows if there may have been or there may soon be another time where I have these kind of moments. But this is twice where, Max has basically not thought about it, not worried about it, just showed up and did the work. And as a result, I have inspired and motivated people to overcome their excuses, and I have inspired, motivated, and maybe even challenged some people with disabilities to be open about their disability. And since the world is better when we all are involved with each other, the fact that more people with disabilities are open about their disability means more people who don't have a disability can connect with people who are differently abled or have a disability. Connect with these people. We can start breaking down some of the fences, some of the walls between the able body and the disabled, and everybody benefits from accessibility. Everybody benefits from inclusion. Sadly, there are too many people in the world today who feel like exclusion and stigmatizing and stereotyping is the way to go, but we all benefit from inclusion, from opening ourselves up to people, to experiences, to places that we don't know. And so I hope that if y'all are listening to me, if you're still listening, because I know I've gone on a long time here, twice in my life, I made a big impact and really didn't realize I was doing it at the time. I don't know if that says something positive about me. I choose to believe it does say something positive about me, which is, and I've got an expression for this, and it applies whether we're talking about in person or over the internet. I say you meet the people you expect to meet. And so by just focusing on the work, on helping small business owners, mom and pop people sell their used rising games, or just focusing on sharing what was going on in my life so other people could be encouraged, is how I got where I am. It's how I made a difference, how I built several brands now as Mr. Midway, Mr. No Excuses, Mr. What's Your Excuse, the Accessibility Advantage. I got more names, more catchphrases, more quotes than just about anybody else on the internet. I need me a good graphic artist so I can start putting more of this stuff on T-shirts and start getting paid. Does that answer your
You
question?
should. Yes, very much so.
Now, since we've done accessibility and we've done some inspiration and motivation, we've crossed back and forth here. I'd like to finish by singing a little bit, but I'm not sure which song I should sing. So do I do the song about accessibility, or do I do the song about not waiting on someday? It's your call as the host.
Whatever your heart says so at the
I think that since we've talked, and even with accessibility, it's about going ahead and starting where you are. So I'm going to do the last verse of Don't Wait on Someday, y'all. So I hope y'all enjoy this. I had a song in my heart and thought it could be great. That put more pressure on me, making me want to wait. Then I took some good advice and sang it anyway. This song couldn't change any lives if I kept saying someday. 'Cause you'll never have enough courage. You'll never have enough time. You'll never have enough money. You'll never have enough spine. Just do it as good as you can, and do it better the next time. 'Cause if you're waiting on that someday, you'll be waiting the rest of your life.
I like the last part where you said just do it the best way you can. The first thing that comes to mind is to set my mailing list.
Your mailing list? Yeah, I'm having trouble with
Yes.
my mailing list. I'm having trouble with my mailing list too, because Mad Mimi went out of business, and now I'm trying to find something else that's accessible.
Yeah, that is also another point of conversation we could add in, like and I know Instagram has accessibility posts and stuff, and now I want to know also, how do I make sure that the newsletter that I'm going
Just
to
make sure
share?
you click that button next to each image that says edit image, so that you can add a description of the image.
Okay.
That's the number one thing. You do that, you're going to make a lot of friends on Instagram.
Awesome. I will do that.
And
Okay.
the more text you can include, whether it's in the image editing or in the narration or the storyline, whatever, the more text you include, the better.
So on YouTube, it's not a problem, right? Because you can read it. The screen reader can read the description of the video.
Yes, it can read the description. If I hit the button, it can read the transcript or so yeah. But YouTube is special because they've been at it longer. I think Google Meet is getting close on it, but with Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, you have to go in and edit each image and add the descriptive text to those images. And then if you want those to have closed captions, then you have to either add them, or you have to bring the video from somewhere where the captions were already added. One of the really hard challenges with images and video, as far as adding the alternative text or adding audio descriptions or closed captions, is that data doesn't travel. It isn't like what I understand, Adobe is working with the XREF part of the images. They're hoping that eventually, in another 2 or 3 years, that if you just add a description to your image on your camera or your phone where you took the image, then it will automatically be part of that image every time you share it somewhere. So like if you describe what's in the picture for somebody who can't see the picture, and you do that on your camera or your phone, then it'll travel. But that isn't possible now. Of course, a lot of people are starting to use artificial intelligence for image descriptions and for video descriptions. The problem with that is that, at least for now, that doesn't meet the WCAG requirements. So in some places, you can get into trouble for depending on AI to describe images or video.
Okay, but will it help?
Personally like it. I don't personally see it that way. To me, accessibility is about the end result, not about the exactly how you get to the end result. So I'm fine with AI helping us with describing images or video if it can do that.
Yeah.
I'm also fine with people having websites. There are some things that are very difficult for a small business owner to code into a website. So sometimes the best answer is done for you. Sometimes the best answer is for a website owner to just go, look, I know this is challenging if you have vision loss or lack of motor control. So just click this button and we'll handle it by email or direct message or something. So there are some cases where done for you is actually the simplest way to get the end result you want. Sometimes, obviously do it yourself is where we want to get to, because that's considered independent and accessible. But to me, all three of those, just like, accomplishing anything else, you're a coach. You know that there are some coaches out there who have set up things where people basically take a course and do it themselves, or they do it themselves some of the time and meet with their coach once a week. Or there's some people where the coach and that person, they work on it as a team. They cooperate. So, we have done for you, done with you, do it yourself, and just about everything else. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the disability community don't see that as an option for accessibility. But to me, I'm all about the results. And if using AI gets me to accessibility, even if it doesn't meet the legal requirements, I'm like, I ain't going to complain, but I know some people who will.
Okay, perfect. That is a wrap on today's inspiring episode with Maxwell Ivey. Thank you for your wisdom, Max, and dedication to continue to uplift the world and others. Now, for our listeners, this has been Your Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Remember, if you've ever felt worthless, you are not alone. Your soul chose to be here, to matter. And for that reason alone, you are worthy. A huge thank you to you again, Max, and to all of you for listening. Until next time, I am Nick Nieras. Keep shining, keep growing, and always remember you are worthy and you are enough. See you in the next episode. Thank you, Max, for your time.
You're very welcome. I've had a very fun time, so thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Love this episode? Now, transformation doesn't end here. Head on to @holistic.lifestyle_with_Nick. That is on my Instagram. Or head on to my website, www.deniqueras.holisticlifestyle.com for more info on my coaching framework, which is the Worthy, Authentic, and Abundant Framework, digital guides, and my upcoming events such as retreats and master classes and workshops. Now, I also do intuitive readings where we get to check on your soul path. And if you're also wanting to check on your energetic alignment, I have done that too. And I offer that kind of services. So, my question to you is, are you ready? Because I am. Let's create your
Hi, Max. Good evening to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Nicolette. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'd like to say thank you first for saying yes to be interviewed today. I'd like to introduce myself to you formally and to all of our listeners tuning in. My name is Nicolette. I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, today we're going to talk about a topic that I don't know much about. The only extent that I have is reading from Wikipedia and Google and now ChatGPT. So I'm truly honored to have you on. I'd like to introduce you to all of our listeners first before we get into our conversation. So, hello everyone. We have Maxwell Ivey here with us. Max is a blind serial online entrepreneur with over 15 years of lived experience and over 4 years working with clients. Now, his passion is advocating for accessibility and inclusion by showing business owners what's in it for them. He will share us the whys and the hows and his knowledge through writing, speaking, teaching, consulting, and podcasting. Welcome to the show, Max. Is it true that your other senses are heightened when you don't?
That is still a debate, and I'd be happy to answer that question as part of your recording if you
But
think
that
it was it.
No, but then Max, you showed it to me. I mean, during this interview, that you picked up the cue. Like, we haven't even met. For those, we haven't even met, but you picked up the cue of it's like you're almost psychic.
Well, I'm not psychic. I'm just an attentive listener. There's actually a continuing debate. Some people believe that your other senses do compensate and they do it quickly. Some people believe that those who compensate do it because they focus more on their other senses. The scientist actually says there's something going on called neural elasticity, which I have to say very slowly or I can't say it at all. Basically, the brain is capable up until a certain age and even sometimes later in life is capable of reprogramming itself. And our vision uses about 85% of our brain's computer processing power. And so the science says that when the brain no longer has visual images to process, it's not going to sit there and do nothing. So it's going to take that computing power, which the brain is one of the biggest computers in the world, and it's going to apply that computing power to the audio input, to the tactile input, to smell, taste, and to processing what you take in through those other senses. The eyes deceive us a lot. We get fooled by our vision. I have a friend who's in law enforcement, and he said there's actually studies been done that the entire response of a police officer changes or can change in the first 15 seconds based on the skin color of the hand. Because most police officers in the first few seconds, they're not even looking at your face. They're looking at your hands because the hands are the dangerous part. And they say color of hands. And that's one of the things they have to work real hard to try to train out of police officers and first responders. But our eyes do fool us. There's a passage in, I think it's 2 Samuel, where God tells Samuel, yeah, you can only see the body. You can only see the person. I can see to the heart. And unfortunately, as human beings, we can't see to the heart. We can only see what we see in front of us. I have a really good friend named Joe Pardo in Philadelphia who I've spoken at his events a couple of times. He said something about me once that I thought was really good. He said that Max may not be able to see, but he opens the eyes of everyone around him.
For sure, I am impacted already.
So there's still a debate going on as to what happens when you lose your vision. And I personally think that it is more focused than anything else. And you also have to remember, the person has to be willing to adapt to what the body is doing. There are, as I'm sure you know from being a transitional coach, there are plenty of people in this world who are happy being unhappy or comfortable being uncomfortable because the fear of change could be worse. And there are people with disability, especially those who achieve their disability through trauma, who never get over it. They never accept it. They never move on. They stay stuck. Just like there are people who have experienced financial crises who are still stuck. And that's another thing. We do not know why some people, they have a bad thing happen to them and they move on. And some people have a bad thing happen to them and they never get out of bed anymore. And the same thing happens with disability, whether it's vision loss or other types of disabilities. And in fact, one of the things that's interesting about the stats around disability that makes it hard is we can only go by people who identify themselves as disabled. And most people that are dealing with challenges caused by aging, which are the same as challenges from disability, don't see themselves as disabled. So we have this, besides, the community, the market is huge to begin with. But when you include people or try to include people who refuse to identify themselves as having a disability, like older people, there's really no telling. We say 1 billion, but if we can only go by people who identify, and then we can only extrapolate that based on percentages of population. So really, it's hard to tell just how big the disability community or disability world is, because there are so many people who refuse to accept that they have a disability. There are lots of people who refuse to accept they're dyslexic. There are lots of people who know that they are autistic or ADHD, but refuse to see themselves as that or seek treatment as that. And we have the aging people that I mentioned before. It's In fact, one of my first talks, I did a word camp in New York City in 2018. In the Q&A section, one of the organizers said he had been refusing to admit that he was losing his vision, but he decided because of my talk that he was going to admit it and start doing something about it. I need to check in on Bud and see how he's doing.
Wow, that took a very different turn. But then, you see, I don't understand why people don't really want to admit their disability. If they could just admit it and just get over it and take it as a superpower instead of a weakness.
Well, because the stigma is still there. There's still too many people who see it as a weakness rather than just another part of the human. And I'm going to introduce you to a lady that I had on my Hearsay Shorts thing that I recorded an episode with her for my podcast, but Zoom ate 93% of it. Yes, I paused in the middle and restarted, and I got the last few minutes, but the rest of it, so I'm going to have to re-interview. She is a big proponent of differently abled as opposed to disabled, and the reason she believes that, and I'm actually starting to come around to her side on this, is
Different,
disabled means other. It means there is something wrong, alien,
defective.
defective. But differently able means there's nothing wrong with you. You're just living with a challenge that many of us could experience during some point in our lifetime. And I almost feel like she's not only on the right side as far as accuracy, but that if we could switch the way people think about disability or differently abled, then I think a lot more people would be able to be more integrated in society because there would be a much lower amount of a stigma around having a disability. And the truth is, at some point in almost everybody's life, at some point, you are going to have to live with the effects of a disability, whether you call it a disability or not. In her case, she was a violinist in her junior high school orchestra, and she had an accident and broke both of her arms. She could not play the violin. So for a year, she played the drums because you can play the drums with your feet. And that was when it hit her, a lot of people are going to have times in their lives when they're physically disabled, whether they call it disability or not. So she's been with the term differently abled. Of course, it's controversial in the disability community. We have enough time being disabled. We'll have a harder time being differently able. I don't know how much experience you have with race in Europe, but it would be kind of like back in the day when older Black people resisted going from calling themselves Black to calling themselves colored, and then resisted even harder when it went from being colored to African American. But like I said, I think that differently able, and of course, it may get me it may get me voted off the island. I think it may actually be helpful. I mean,
I think so.
if more people thought about disability as an experience rather than a condition, then wouldn't that change the way you think about the people who have the disability? I don't know.
For sure.
I'm asking this question of somebody who makes their living getting people to change the way they think about themselves and the world. So I'm asking the right person.
Okay, if you were to give me a multiple choice question, if I were to choose between those two answers, I would definitely go for differently able.
I think so too. Unfortunately, and here's one of those things. I've been hosting this podcast for a company in accessibility, and so I'm required to do it the way they want it done. So when that episode goes live, they will be editing out the part where me and her talked about differently abled versus disabled because they are a big company. I'm just a sole entrepreneur who consults with people on their accessibility. They are a big company who can't risk ticking off the disability community or the nonprofit organizations that advocate for people with disabilities or their corporate business clients who don't want to be part of no comparison about male genitalia. You know what I'm saying? So they edited that part out. But when I re-interview her for my podcast, we're definitely going to talk about it because I really think that, that she's onto something. I understand their point of view.
I am from Southeast Asia, Malaysia.
Okay, cool. I haven't been on with anybody from that part of the world before.
Well, there's a first for everybody. So
I've been on with somebody from Pakistan. I've been on with somebody from Afghanistan, believe it or not. I've been on with somebody from Turkey more than once, and Australia many times, but not from Malaysia before.
Well, glad to be the first one. Okay, Max, so we're going to start now.
All righty.
All right. Okay.
Let me turn off my screen reader.
Okay.